The Supreme Court has handed the Trump administration a victory, at least for now, slapping down the temporary injunction implemented by the corrupt Judge Boasberg, who blocked the White House's use of the Alien Enemies Act in deporting terrorist gang members out of the country and into El Salvador. And this is an article discussing this from Fox News. It's titled "Supreme Court Grants Trump Request to Lift Stay Halting Venezuelan Deportations." This is by Brienne Depiche, or whatever. She writes, "The Supreme Court on Monday granted President Donald Trump's request to vacate a lower court's ruling barring the administration from using a 1798 wartime immigration law to immediately deport Venezuelan nationals, including alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang, from the U.S., marking a significant victory for the administration as it advances key immigration priorities. Justices on the High Court ruled 5-4 to grant the administration's request to lift the stay in a temporary victory for Trump and his allies. At issue was the Alien Enemies Act, or the immigration law passed by Congress. Lawyers for the Trump administration had urged the court to vacate the lower court ruling, arguing in a Supreme Court filing that the lower court orders rebuffed their immigration agenda, including their ability to protect the nation against foreign terrorist organizations and risk debilitating effects for delicate foreign negotiations. Today is a bad day to be a terrorist in the United States of America, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said in a video posted to X, adding that Trump was correct in using his authority on using the Alien Enemies Act to deport terrorists out of the country. Meanwhile, Attorney General Pam Bondi called the landmark decision a victory for the rule of law, adding that an activist judge in Washington, D.C. does not have the jurisdiction to seize control of President Trump's authority to conduct foreign policy and keep the American people safe. The Department of Justice will continue fighting in court to make America safe again, she concluded. Now, J.D. Vance also weighed in on this. He wrote, "This is a major loss for the lunatics and a major win for the American people," Vice President J.D. Vance responded following the High Court's ruling. Onward. The Supreme Court's ruling follows a temporary order from the U.S. District Judge James Boasberg last month, blocking the administration's use of the law. And it also stops the pause by a federal appeals court in a 2-1 decision where one of the idiot judges said Nazis get better treatment than some of the migrants deported under the law. Now, while this is a victory for the Trump administration, it's not a total win across the board, because the Supreme Court still managed to put in a few caveats, a few limits to the Trump administration, which for all practical purposes will still stop any attempts at mass deportation from occurring. See, in the court's ruling in Trump's favor, the Supreme Court said this. They said detainees must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the act. The notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. The Supreme Court, by saying that habeas corpus is allowed here, throws a wrench into the machinery of the Alien Enemies Act and its original intent. The Alien Enemies Act was designed for wartime speed. Think rounding up and shipping out foreign nationals from hostile countries when the nation's under threat. No muss, no fuss, just get them the hell out. Back then, when the law was originally created, it was about grabbing suspected spies or saboteurs during the quasi-war with France, and later it got dusted off for German and Japanese aliens in World War II. The whole point of this law was to give executive power muscle. The president calls the shots, labels the enemy, and moves fast without the courts clogging the pipes. And we've seen this happen before. Take, for example, under FDR during World War II, where tens of thousands of deportations were handled in just a matter of months, not years, because habeas challenges were rare or brushed aside under war powers. And now fast forward to today. The Supreme Court is essentially saying to Donald Trump, sure, you can use this old law, but everyone gets a ticket to habeas court first. This is a modern due process overlay for this law that basically guts its ability to act quickly. And why that matters, my friends, is the one thing that Donald Trump hasn't yet fully gotten into yet is mass deportation of the roughly 20 to 30 million illegal aliens that are currently infesting the country. And the reason why they haven't is precisely things like this. By the Supreme Court allowing habeas corpus to those being arrested for deportation, if you tried doing mass deportations now, millions of people would just file for habeas corpus, effectively bringing deportation efforts to a standstill, overwhelming the court system. So this is beyond problematic. You have so many illegal aliens in this country. Now, it is such a vast problem that without swift action, think President Eisenhower back in the 1950s, booting over 1 million illegal aliens in just a matter of 6 months, without something like that, the mass deportation efforts would never be finished. And that means that eventually political will to get it done will wane. And in due time, the Democrat Party will find a way to slither back into power and once again resume their attempt at granting amnesty for all the illegal aliens in the country, because that is the whole purpose of allowing them in en masse. This has all happened before, mind you. 1986, under Ronald Reagan, a deal was struck to close the border, build a wall, and at the same time give everyone amnesty. The idea was a one-time fix, build the wall, give everyone amnesty, be done with it. There was only 3 million illegal aliens at the time. The idea was, hey, it's enough, we can absorb them and end the crisis permanently. But Reagan was betrayed. Amnesty for the 3 million illegal aliens was granted, but the wall was never built and the border was never secured. And so the problem grew ever larger, as once you grant amnesty, you have effectively incentivized more people to come. And why all of this matters is the Democrat Party discovered in the first batch of amnesty that illegal aliens were a gold mine for creating a massive new voter base, an underclass of citizens that could be tied to government handouts. To back this up, here is a clip that I did from a previous episode, just a little over a week ago, where I covered this very topic. However, the Democrat Party eventually betrayed Reagan, and the wall was never built, and enforcement never stepped up. And by the mid-1990s, the pretense of even trying to build the wall by the Democrat Party was permanently abandoned, even as illegal immigration surged post-1986, with the illegal alien population tripling from its 2.7 million, which received amnesty in 1986, to roughly 8 to 10 million new illegal aliens. Because, of course, once you grant amnesty one time, you have now incentivized more people to come. But I hear you ask, why would they do this? What's the point? How do you know they would be voters for the Democrat Party? The Democrat Party discovered that illegal aliens will vote overwhelmingly for them once they've received amnesty. And we're talking numbers of roughly 70% historically. California, which had the bulk of the illegal aliens that were granted amnesty in 1986, dramatically shifted from a Republican stronghold which voted almost exclusively for the Republican Party for 30 years prior to 1986, suddenly shift. Never again would California vote for a Republican in a national election after 1988. And by the year 2000, the state had essentially become a one-party rule dystopia, with a never-ending increase in government control and regulation. The Democrat Party had complete power, and of course, the party of big government, when they have unadulterated access to power, they just can't help themselves, and they strangled the lifeblood of California, leading to its massive decline that we see today. Now, this is where things took a sharp turn in politics that we are still grappling with today. The Democrat Party saw this, and they began moving away from their old base, the old white working class, the blue collar, the unions, and instead began turning their attention to creating a party of minority coalitions. We can trace the beginning of this back to right around 2002. After they lost the white working class base to Ronald Reagan and later to George W. Bush, the Democrat Party eyed minority coalitions as the future for the party. That means Latinos, African Americans, Asians, and so on and so forth as their new growth sector. They were going to abandon the white working class. The idea then, they saw the opportunity to grow this minority coalition with endless immigration. White Americans, they believed, would eventually become the minority in the U.S. and thus would become irrelevant. So if they could gain the vast majority of votes from the other races, they could secure permanent power down the road. And by 2008, Obama's victory in 2008 cemented this ideology for the Democrat Party. During Obama's first election, 67% of Latino voters casted their ballot for him. And publicly, the Democrat Party came out and made it clear that the future was no longer white, but multicultural coalitions. David Axelrod, for example, openly announced the move away from the white working class. And so, the push for amnesty began to intensify. Since 2000, there have been 9 attempts at granting mass amnesty here in the U.S., all of which have failed so far, and the most recent was 2021. Interestingly, the number of illegal aliens in official numbers magically capped off in the early 2000s at 11 to 12 million, and has officially remained the same ever since, despite how many millions of people have continued to cross the border since the early 2000s. Now, my theory on why that number remains the same is that by keeping it the same publicly, there must be some kind of internal polling here that shows that that's a manageable number that the American people will say, okay, we can grant amnesty to 11 million people. We can absorb that. But if you told them it's 25, 30 million, people are going to have a problem with that. And they were also hoping that this 11 million number would be enough to where they could trick the Republicans into committing political suicide by importing millions upon millions of fresh Democrat voters, which would basically wipe them out. And so to tie up all the loose ends here, with the Supreme Court still finding a way to put limits on the Alien Enemies Act, at least for now, the Trump administration will still find that its hands are tied in how fast and what scale they can remove illegal aliens from the country. In fact, a lawyer from the ACLU, Lee Gallant, what a name, has attempted to frame the court's decision as a win for the side of lawlessness, saying, "This ruling means we will need to start the court process over again in a different venue." But the critical point is that the Supreme Court said individuals must be given due process to challenge their removal under the Alien Enemies Act, and that is a huge victory. And so the fight marches on. Whether or not we will ever get to see mass deportation in the future is still up in the air. But for the survival of our representative republic, let us hope that the Trump administration finds a way.